So if a possible Ebola outbreak has you concerned, don't look to the World Health Organization for comfort. The WHO predicting up to 10,000 new cases per week as soon as 2 months from now. The World Bank also not providing much comfort, putting Ebola's economic drain at more than $32 billion by the end of 2015. Here to discuss it, our very own Charlie Gasparino. We also have Jonathan Honig of Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund in the flesh. He's also a Fox News contributor. And Rob Basso from Advantage Payroll Services. Jonathan, I'm going to let you go first because you're here in person. 10,000 cases per week?
Where? Where are those 10,000 cases? They're not in Brooklyn, Melissa. They're not on the Upper West Side. They're not in the Midwest. They're not even in America.
You're not worried.
Listen, I'm not worried. I feel terrible for the people who are in these affected areas. These affected areas, Melissa, as you know, are primarily tribal and mystic Africa. That's where epidemics occur. Thankfully, most of us live in the first world.
But some of those people stream here to try and get medical attention.
It's true, and thankfully, we're taking preemptive steps to make sure that the virus doesn't spread. But in terms of actual risk to daily life, keep in mind 128 people every day die in this country from car accidents. The entire death count from Ebola is going to be a lot less, thankfully.
There's a Fox News alert that Jonathan Honig is actually agreeing with President Obama on something. President
That's
Obama,
true. It is a first.
Last week, we reported this exclusively yesterday. You were absent yesterday.
I was. Am I in trouble for that? I'm back now. Just like Kim Jong-un, I am back.
Playing hooky. But anyway, he basically said at a fundraising meeting last week that he thinks this is eminently containable, that it's not going to pose a major risk to the United States. I will say this. If people keep saying, I get these things on Twitter that the flu is more dangerous, more deadly, that more people die in car accidents. But, you know, the flu is somewhat preventable. Car accidents are somewhat preventable.
How about
Ebola?
$32 billion event?
Ebola, once it gets here, is very difficult. I mean, this is a transferable disease.
But I think
people are taking it a little too lightly.
I think it's different than some of the outbreaks we've previously seen in history where it's just a small number. This number is completely different than it was decades ago. So I think if we don't get in front of it as a nation and lead the way, that's going to be the problem.
It defies predictions, and it's also spooking the markets. I mean, markets are fighting back today after a rocky run of declines of volatility. All three major indices taking a sharp dive yesterday after an Ebola scare at Boston's Logan Airport. 5 passengers on a flight from Dubai were removed by hazmat teams. Remember these pictures? After exhibiting flu-like symptoms, city health officials now claiming none of the 5 have Ebola. But the moment that those pictures and that story crossed, the market moved.
This is clearly a tradable issue. I'm not saying it's a logical tradable issue right now, but it clearly is. When I've gotten calls from traders over the last, I would say, month about Ebola being a headline to trade off of. How bad is it? And one guy raising the possibility if there's a larger outbreak of a black swan, the market tanking major. So
it's always a question of markets of probability and possibility. But if you want to talk about trading on Ebola, Melissa, honestly, I think you should probably more likely be trading on how many times your neighbor's dog poops in the lawn before you trade on Ebola.
No, but they're trading on it. But
they're trading on nothing, Charlie. They're trading on total skepticism.
They're trading on total fear. And whether we like it or not, the market is interpreting every headline as a tradable event on this thing.
Well, I'll tell you who doesn't seem to be worried about it. I mean, say what you want about Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. At least he has his priorities straight. In the midst of everything we're talking about with Ebola, the campaign against ISIS, Secretary Hagel penned a report on global warming. Writing, quote, in our defense strategy, we refer to climate change as a threat multiplier because it has the potential to exacerbate many of the challenges we are dealing with today, from infectious disease to terrorism. He's saying that climate change makes terrorism a bigger threat.
Part of the reason
Can anyone follow the logic?
Part of the reason that we're the most powerful nation in the world is because of our military. And I think his timing of this is significantly suspect. But the reality is having our military poised to be in the right position at all times and trained at the right position.
To fight global warming?
No, they're not to fight global warming. They have to be able to fight in all circumstances. So I understand what he's saying. What I'm suspect is
so
the
if it's 2 degrees warmer, they've got to figure out how to deal with it.
Well, it's more than 2 degrees.
lower.
It's more than 2 degrees warmer, and I think that's what he's trying to say.
That's ludicrous.
When
Go
you're
ahead.
talking about fighting global warming, you're actually talking about fighting mankind. Global warming is going to be even less of an impact than Ebola, and that's a tiny impact. And when you're talking about fighting global warming, you're basically talking about hurting mankind.
Should we be
Melissa.
focused on ISIS, do you think, by any chance, at the Pentagon,
yeah,
rather than global warming?
Obviously, yes. I mean, listen, if you want to know why the markets are so skittish and trading off of unrealized fears, or maybe, exaggerated fears about Ebola and a lot of other things,
Is because our Pentagon officials are worried about climate change
think about
instead of
the
ISIS.
market. The markets are saying that we have a government that's somewhat out of control right now.
Yes.
So you look at everything, every headline through that prism. On top of it, no one knows what the Fed's doing. So then these headlines become bigger.
Okay. Shares of Alibaba digging out of a huge hole today thanks to an assist from Wall Street. Charlie, you've got more on this one.
Well, what was interesting about this today is that as this thing has been hitting new lows every day, UBS comes to the rescue. UBS slaps a buy rate recommendation on the stock. We should point out UBS wasn't one of the main underwriters of the first deal, the IPO. Clearly, they're in the running to do the secondary. I will just say this to small investors, and I think this is something to take away. Maybe the other network will point this out. Whenever these shares get crushed, Wall Street comes to the rescue and puts this stuff out. It's called a booster shot.
They put a buy rating on it and a $100 price target, just to be clear to everyone in the audience.
I would take it with a grain of salt. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't buy Alibaba. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be a long-term investment. Do not rely on UBS's recommendation on this. And what's really sort of, I think, just so cynical about this is that UBS is not just like Goldman Sachs, where it deals with rich people, very high net worth. They have a bunch of brokers that deal with average people. So just be really careful with this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think Charlie's right. I mean, opinions are like smiles. Everyone has one. And
I was going to think rear ends or something.
Yeah, well, it's usually quoted something else. But everyone has one, and UBS has one as well. I think, as Charlie is very right, to be dubious of all investment recommendations. And I tell you, Facebook is doing a lot better than Alibaba is. Facebook isn't too far from all-time highs. To me, that's a much better buy than Alibaba.
Speaking of Facebook, Google and Facebook squaring off yet again, this time over virtual reality. Google reportedly planning an investment in Magic Leap. Look at that. That's it on your screen right there. It is an Oculus Rift competitor. I'm glad you asked.
What is an Oculus Rift competitor?
Okay, so Oculus Rift.
What is an Oculus Rift?
Those are that 3D glasses, goggles
what is
that
a
you
3D
put
glass?
on.
Look at this, Charlie. This is a miracle on Earth. This is like
alternate reality.
This is unbelievable.
Where baby elephants are in your hands and it's delightful and they're right there and you're all excited about it. Okay,
I get more excited with a martini in my hand.
No, but why?
Then you see the elephants anyway. Exactly. Perfect.
Why
Pink
is this surprising? Google wants to be on the bleeding edge of everything, don't they? This is not surprising to me that they want to be on the cutting edge of this.
To me, it feels like this. I mean, this is more sign of the top, more sign of the bubble, or just that I'm incredibly lame, which is also possible.
Or you're getting old, dude.
I guess so.
Melissa,
I don't
there
need
is
this.
no top
At least
in
I knew what it
innovation.
was.
Listen, we grew up with carbon paper. We grew up with paper checks.
Maybe.
This is the brand new reality, and every day it's like a world's fair with these tech companies. They come up with a new innovation that literally changes the world.
And they got plenty of cash to do it.
I mean, do I need to hold an elephant in the palm of my hand?
But why wouldn't you want to?
Yeah, so let's go back to your flip
I have
phone.
things to do.
Let's go back to that flip phone while we're at it. Let's
because I work for a living. Because I've got to go pick my kids up from school.
And make sure you have the horse and buggy pulled up for that.
I've got to go to the grocery store. Why do I not want to stand there with goggles on and an elephant in my hand? Because I have stuff to do.
But listen, Melissa, there is sort of channel my inner Jonathan Hogan. There is an American tradition of innovation, of jumping the shark. And jumping the shark at times. So when you go so far, you get beaten back, but you still have gone beyond it.
The iPhone started with the Apple Newton 20 years earlier.
Okay. Embattled money manager Stevie Cohen out of trouble and on the moral high ground. His new company, Point72, offering cash bonuses to employees for, quote, adhering to the highest ethical standards. So he is now the keeper of the moral high ground.
Now, I just want you to know, Mr. Keeper of the moral high ground, I ran into him. I didn't run into him. I was at the restaurant Milos up the block, very high-end fish place.
I love Milos.
Great
you
place.
Saw him, so you busted over to his table?
I was downstairs at the bar, waiting to be seated.
Oh, come on.
Waiting to be seated. He's upstairs at the private room. He takes a look at me.
Not private any longer.
Takes a look at me. Within, I would say, 5 minutes, his party comes down the stairs, all except for him. He snuck out the back, Jack.
Yeah.
And you
Now-
didn't chase him down?
Now, well, I couldn't find him. I thought he was coming out the front. I was just waiting for him, and he snuck out the back. I will say this. Listen,
What did you have planned for him? What were you going to do when he got down to the bottom? What were you going to say? Say it right now.
I was just going to say, Mr. Cohen, just hello. It's been many years since you've taken my phone calls. And I know your wife really hates me. She told someone that once.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I think, it's almost Steve Cohen's becoming a joke in many ways. I mean, if you want to do one thing to get back into becoming a money manager that runs public money, which you want,
Make a bunch of money, and then people want to give you other money.
No, this is all about the government. You just keep a low profile. You don't do stuff like this.
Well, and Charlie,
Charlie, wait. Can you tell our audience you're a little sorry for having just said that just now?
I'm sorry.
That was a little mistake there.
I'm
All right,
sorry.
let's end on that note and keep going. Thanks, guys. A nightmare at 30,000 feet. An American Airlines flight forced to make an emergency landing after cabin walls inside the plane began to crack.
All of a sudden, I heard this loud pop, 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 really loud, and a ripping sound. And as this is all going on, we're looking around trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, it sounded like bowling balls were falling from the overhead bins. It was terrifying. We didn't know what was going on.
How scary. None of the nearly 200 people on the plane were injured during the incident, luckily. How terrifying. Meanwhile, the flight attendants union is suing the FAA to reinstate the ban due to passengers not listening to emergency announcements, the ban on devices, that is, even warning that the devices can become dangerous projectiles. Let's go back to Jonathan and Rob. What do you think? I think somebody's BlackBerry is interfering with our signal right now. It sounds like it in my ear, but...
Well, isn't it ironic? You've got the flight attendants who don't own the airlines suing the FAA who don't own the airlines about what should happen on the airlines. This should only be up to the decision of the airlines, Melissa. They're the ones who own the flights. They should dictate the
Have you ever
terms
used
of
your
what happens
BlackBerry
on
as
the
a
plane.
projectile, or do you not have the security, the safety thing memorized in the beginning? Even my kids have it
Not only
memorized.
have I not used it as a projectile,
Okay.
the simple fact is...
Only at
you could
home. I haven't done it on a plane.
Melissa, you could have a book in your hand and it could go flying out of your hand. What's the difference?
Yeah.
I mean, people don't pay attention to those things. I watch. You sit there on the plane, nobody pays attention
Well, I don't
to
know.
it.
You have it memorized after the first 150 times that you see it. Anyway, so you are now free to move about the cabin, but there will be no turbulence on this flight, thank goodness. This refurbished Boeing plane is now a bona fide hotel room in Costa Rica. It's going to set you back $250 right in the middle of the jungle. Look at that. I mean, I don't want to spend any more time on a plane than I have to. So I don't know why I would then choose it as my hotel.
It sounds like a bargain. I mean, New York is a jungle, and I'm paying double that for my terrible hotel room tonight.
I wonder if they have a rolling cart that has a cocktails going down as you're getting ready for dinner.
I mean, I don't know. Do they take away your BlackBerries and devices? Do you think when you go in there? It looks like the walls have already come off that one.
It's a cool idea, though. It's a cool.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. Thanks to both of you for joining us.